All right, what's up, everybody? We are going to be talking about 5 routine ideas, design ideas, concepts, really, that kind of could help inform as you guys are working on your routines. We've been doing a little bit of routine design workshop type work, getting ready to go into the new year, and we've also been looking at other folks' routines, kind of giving advice and guidance. And I thought that maybe if there were a small guide out there that would give you kind of a jump start in things that we could think about. Maybe that would help folks out there take their routines up a notch, or if you're just getting started, really start off from a solid place. So, this assumes that you're familiar with the idea of exhibition drill, junior RTC competition, scenario, that sort of thing. And these are kind of concepts that can be woven in universally, whether it's armed or unarmed or hybrid, or some combination thereof, whatever. So let's just dive right in. Let's take a look at what these 5 concepts are going to be. But before we do that, a little bit of a disclaimer here. Um, Judging drill meets right now, especially exhibition, is I'm not going to say that it's poor, but I will say that it's extremely underdeveloped. I will say that it's not maybe been given the measure of thoughtfulness that other like athletic performing arts have been given. And a lot of times, the judge's brief for exhibition is the most scarce, and it really just relies on like, "Hey, grade what you know," is a phrase that we hear a lot, which means that basically what happens is the judges reduce the work of the students down to dress cover, interval distance, things that they're familiar with, maybe in their background. And then it becomes this subjectivity contest of what do I like or what do I dislike. And so I think it's really important before we dive in and look at these things. These are not things that any judge is going to write down on a score sheet. No judge is going to be talking about the rhythmic motifs that you've woven in from the start to the finish of your routine. What they're going to talk about are bigger picture things. But these are all concepts that basically are a part of or inform all of the storytelling art that we consume already. And so they're very universal human type things that people are going to respond to. They're the reason why great movies work. They're the reason why great music works. They're the reason why your favorite books are your favorite books. If you're a reader, these are just basic universal performance and storytelling type concepts that will really help any routine come to life. But again, don't expect for a judge to be talking about some of these things in the language that we're going to talk about them. We'll get there eventually. We'll get there. But for now, this will help us on the side of being the designer, whether you're a cadet commander who is making the routine for their team, or modifying the routine for their team, or you're an instructor trying to help guide the process and what should we be thinking about and how do I know this is logical and meets all the check boxes that it's supposed to meet, or whether you're a coach trying to help advise and guide teams as they kind of step into the world of exhibition. These things are universal concepts, right? And this is the language that we use to talk about it and the things that we think about. And then on the output side, a great performance is a great performance, regardless of what someone who may or may not be qualified believes it to be, right? So the concepts are, in order that we'll discuss them: effect, which is the impression that's produced in the mind of a person; homage, which is a special honor or a respect shown to someone; causality, right, the relationship between cause and effect; motif, which is a kind of a distinctive feature or idea found throughout, a work of art; and staging, which is really the process of selecting and adapting and working with the performance space that you are given. In our case, the drill area. So, effect. Effect is the primary driver of exhibition drill. In other words, exhibition drill is not just we go out and we do cool thing here, cool thing here, cool thing here, cool thing here, and we try to check boxes and move around the floor. Effect is really what we're trying to aim for at the end state, right? These are the intentionally designed, intentionally created. We sat down and we said, what is this supposed to be? Visual or audio moments created within a routine. And there's 3 primary ways to think about this, right? And whether you're doing arm drill, unarmed drill, a combination of these are kind of a universal things that we can appeal to with effect. And when we're making our routines and we're making our performances, we should be thinking in every single piece of choreography as the routine evolves, what is the primary effect or what is the primary impact that we are trying to have in this particular moment of the performance. So the 3 things are Aesthetic, intellectual, and emotional effects. Aesthetic effect. This is what most people think of when you do something, you ask your friend, like, hey, is this cool? That's what we're talking about. It's things that appeal to our senses. And in our case, the sense of sight or the sense of hearing. These are the things that are created specifically to be interesting in an aesthetic type way. So, for example, lots of routines, both armed, unarmed, and hybrid, utilize beats and rhythms, right? Well, if the idea of the beat or rhythm is to start bobbing your head and nodding along with it and getting that groove, aesthetic effect. If you have a really cool, complex formation change that's very visually appealing and geometric and neat looking, and the idea is that somebody watches and goes, "Oh man, that looks really really cool." That's aesthetic effect. This is kind of like your entry level gateway into effects, and this is kind of a great place to start because the question is simply, does it look cool? Does it sound cool? Is the combination of those two creating something that's appealing to our senses, right? And of course, that's subjective. But if we at least start with the idea that we're trying to do that, we'll go probably much further than just trying to make something and then hoping that it is, appealing in some way. But then beyond the aesthetic, right, we can go deeper than that. We can go to the intellectual level. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's, in effect, a moment in the routine, a piece of choreography that engages the audience, the judge, whoever's watching. It engages our brain in such a way that causes us to think about things that are outside of the performance. Now, a lot of score sheets boil this down to routine as presented required much practice. That's talking about intellectual effect. Because if you did something that was, let's say, so complex, so many layers of depth. There's movement and there's different squads doing different things at different times, and there's different, angular things happening that are connected to each other. And you just look at that and go, wow, I bet that took a lot of practice to get to that level. Well, now I'm not thinking about what's happening in front of me. I'm thinking about what happened in the past, right? In order to take myself out of the moment and put myself at practice, that's got to be something that's happening up here. That's intellectual effect, right? Another great example that a lot of teams could probably utilize very early in their journey, right, is to intentionally design into their routines, maybe skill sets that are less challenging, less demanding, right? So, maybe it's a spin skill set that's not like we're not throwing the rifles, all the way up to triple type level. But we're gonna intentionally put it in the routine and design around it in a way that and we're gonna practice it in a way that makes sure that we just crush it, right? We absolutely crush whatever that skill is. And when that happens in the routine and the level of comfort, the level of mastery, and the way that we set it up in the routine to kind of just stand on its own, when that moment of just crushing that particular thing happens, a lot of the times an onlooker or a judge is going to look at that and go, wow, you know what? I bet instead of throwing the rifle around, 1.5 times, I bet that team could have thrown it around 3 times and caught it just as well. Right. And then they made a choice. They're not going to do that. They made a choice to do it this way. And when that happens, you see this happen a lot in individual exhibition drill, for example. A lot of the times someone will do a pretty neat skill set, but it won't be the most crazy or death defying ever. And the judges will have this response of, well, I bet they could have done something harder. And as soon as you are thinking about it, not what they actually did, but what they could have done, intellectual effect, right? Because you've taken their brain out of the space they're in and you cause them to think about something, in this case, a hypothetical situation that doesn't even exist. So creating those moments of intellectual effect that cause us to think about something other than what's happening in front of us, that's powerful too. And the last one, and we see this a lot in exhibition drill, is emotional effect, emotional impact. They appeal to the emotions in some sort of way, right? If you're an Air Force team and you're founding off, the Air Force song, well, what's that designed to do? That's designed to have somebody, stand up a little bit straighter and taller and say, oh, I'm really proud of what they're doing, because maybe I'm an Air Force judge and I'm responding to that, right? But also moments of shock, right? Moments of surprise, things that we thought we thought it was going to be this, but it turns out to be this, and oh, right? That's an emotional response to what you're performing. Nervousness. I know that when we talk about routines, a lot of armed routines will do, the big tosses and create a lot of drama by raising the rifle up slowly. It's one of those things where I think a lot of us are like, oh, we can't I don't want to watch because it's, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, emotional effect. So thinking about every moment of our routine, every piece of choreography that we make, everything that we are doing in that routine should come back to like, what is the impact we're hoping to have on our audience, on our judges, whoever, and how can we do more to bring out, and find, maybe we have an existing sequence. We're like, well, what's the effect supposed to be? Well, is it aesthetic? Is it intellectual? Is it emotional? How can we lean into that? How can we lead up to it? How can we move away from it? These are things that we should be thinking about when we're making our routines. So that's kind of effect in a nutshell. Number two, homage. We use this one a lot, and I think it's important for us, as teachers and educators in the activity, because drill is really this thing that doesn't have a lot of documented history. Right? There's only one scholarly book on drill. If you're such a nerd that you want to go look it up, there's only really one. Most of what we know is passed down, commander to team, from instructor to instructor. These are all kind of word of mouth sort of things. And nowadays with documentation, right, whether it's video or social media, we're learning from other people. But the neat thing about drill is that it's this unique American thing that we do. And everything that we're doing today is connecting us to someone who did it before, a real person at a real point in time who really had an idea. And we're all connected in this sort of tapestry of the activity. And so one of the things that we really enjoy, and this is not to say to go out and just copy things that you like, which of course is a way to get started, and we encourage that. This is to say, go to that next level of like, what is important to us. Maybe it's, we're from a certain city, so I'm going to go and I'm going to research what drill team has looked like in Houston, going back over the years. And I'm going to go and look at some of those old school. Maybe I turn up some video. Maybe I can find some examples throughout history of like, what did that style of drill look like, and can I incorporate that into what we're doing, today with our routine. And I think the biggest benefit, that goes beyond just like, oh, it's cool, so I want to do it too, is that it really allows the team, right? Today's performers. It really allows them to connect to, in a very real way, people that have done a routine that had similar features or had that similar element to it, years and years ago. I mean, we were literally talking to someone. We in our choreography, we incorporated, and we asked somebody who authentically knew that choreography to come in and teach, a piece of, a historical piece of drill. And then, talking to somebody who had done drill, and I want to say in where, like, where this move came from, or like the origination of it back in the 70s, they saw it, and their comment was like, "Oh yeah, no, I recognize that as something that came from where we were doing this." And from 2023 to 1970 something, is not a long amount of time, but it makes it real in a way that I think connects us into and weaves us into, kind of the history of the activity. And so even if you're just getting started, looking for historical things that could be impactful, it could be meaningful, is a great way to get inspiration, is a great way to call back to, things. If you're an Air Force team, maybe you're looking at what has the Air Force Honor Guard done, paying homage to that style. If you're an Army team, what are some of the things that are commonly, associated with the Army drill team, or the old guard, stuff like that can really kind of help bring some information, inspiration, information into what you're doing. So homage, really powerful tool or concept that we can use as well. Now, this next one is kind of highbrow, but I was just flipping through, I think, YouTube, and a short came up, and it was actually the creators of a really, really popular television show. And they were like giving a guest lecture at a college. I think it was like kind of a filmmaking, or something like movie making type class that they were lecturing to. And they said something that was really, I think, right on point. And they were trying to explain like the plot and the flow of a story. And they said, basically, if you have a plot point and another plot point, and the connecting piece is, and then, like, so we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this. That's when they said it's not going to be very effective for you. And what they said was, it should be, this happens, therefore this happens. This happens, but then this happens, right? And so that there's that sense of connectivity or that sense of flow where one thing is causing another thing to happen. And the only way that we go to the next point is because something before it happened. And I think a lot of times in exhibition routines, things become very like, I do this, then I do this, then I do this, then I do this. And when you're just getting started, better than nothing to do this, then this, then this. But as you continue to develop and as you continue to grow your routines, I think this is where really great routines become great because it's almost like it's not just a series of just pictures and sketches that are just kind of like, oh, we go here, 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 and here. It really becomes this moment here happens because this formation change that we just did over here asks us to now do this. And because we did this, the audience or the judges are going to be expecting that we do that because we got in a line. They're going to expect that we're going to do a rip line, but we're going to do something else that turns that idea on its head. And so basically, the routine becomes greater than the sum of its parts, right? And in doing that, we create this flow. I think that people call this like composition or flow is like when it's really not just logical, but it's like we could only have done this because the thing before it set us up to be able to do that. Like we could have only done this particular type of piece of choreography or this particular thing in this place because the thing before it set us up and told us that that's where it wants it to go. When we do routine designs with schools, when we get into mapping the floor plans and diagramming the floor plans, this starts to happen almost organically, which is like, okay, we've already done this, this, and this. We've been here, here, and here. So the routine is now telling us if we've already been here, we can't go back there. It wants us, therefore, because we went here, therefore, we should flow over to here, right? And so basically what happens is everything becomes cohesive. What happened before sets up what happens next. And what happens next is going to set up the next thing that comes along. And so you get that really strong sense of connectivity from start to finish in your entire routine. And I think this is one of those areas where you could literally ask yourself, hey, we're doing this thing here, and then we want to go over to this area and do this thing. Okay, so what is the thing over here that's the cause and effect relationship to the thing over here, right? We were smooth and light and more finesse based over here. And so we've set up that expectation. And now we're going to flip that on its head and we're going to do something. Well, they were like this over here, but when we get over here, it's going to cause us to be more heavy handed. And so kind of thinking about how the segments are related, I think is really, when they said not and then, but instead, therefore, or instead, but. I think those transition words, kind of as you think about your routines, would help bring, a lot of cohesiveness to what you're doing. So causality, big concept to think about, kind of at a 10,000 foot level. Are you just creating a series of sketches, or are you creating something that is cohesive? And if you took any one of those pieces out, the whole thing wouldn't feel as complete as a result. The next one is motif. And if you are an English nerd, as we are, this one will sound familiar. Maybe you're, face palming because you're like, I don't want to hear any more vocabulary words. But a motif is just a repeated idea. It's an idea that shows up throughout a piece of work. It's a repeated kind of thing that we continue to come back to, right? Repetition, I think, gets a bad rep in exhibition drill because repetition bad because did not think of other thing to do, right? And it's even on the score sheets is like anti-repetitive. It's like, okay. But the idea here is not that we're taking an entire 20-second piece of choreo and repeating it throughout the performance. The idea here is that we're taking an idea and we're scattering it throughout. And I think one of the best examples that we like to point to is like, whatever you did in the beginning of your performance, can you somehow mirror that on the way out? Can you establish a entry and exit motif that creates this sense of symmetry? And no judge is going to write down great sense of symmetry with that visual motif on the intro and exit. No, they're going to say routine was logical, right? So by dropping these ideas in, and this can be very, very simple, right? I was just looking at a routine where they had a section that has, one of those beat-based things where the squads ripple and they slam the rifles and they like kick out their foot to one side, and then they do it to the other side and kind of ripples. And they had two sections of it, right? And I was like, "Oh, maybe if we just teased out that idea here earlier on, by the time we actually do that full sequence, it feels like oh, we've heard that before, it's familiar, it's not repetitive. It just feels like we're coming home to that idea that we already established, much early in the routine." That's an example of using motifs. Um, I was watching an interview, and this was with, I think it was John Williams, who does all the, famous, film scores. And he was basically talking about how, like, when he writes a character's theme song, when the character appears on the screen and their theme song is going on in the background, he basically said, "Listen, in all my work, by the time you finally hear that character's theme song, you've already heard it a billion times leading up to that moment," because he would take a rhythm in that song and he'd drop it in somewhere earlier in a different part, of the background music. Or he'd take like a melody, a little piece of the melody and drop it in somewhere else. And so even though you haven't thought, "Oh my goodness, I've heard this before," by the time that full, background music and the character comes on screen is like, "Oh, you've heard it before. It feels familiar." This is what we're talking about here is, can you take little nuggets of rhythm stuff, of visual stuff, and can you drop them in, cohesively around so that it feels like every time you come back to it, it feels familiar or it feels comfortable. Not in a way that's repetitive, right? We're not talking about like just do it, in other words, the motif can't be the effect. The effect is like, how does it appeal to the audience? We don't want to repeat those exact things, but little, in the micro. Maybe it's a little rhythmic beat that you have in the beginning and then you sprinkle throughout, and there's pieces of it here and there. And then finally in the report out, everything's coming together and that beat finally gets fully, blown up and realized at the end. Maybe it's we're gonna use you know, one consistent skill set, like we're gonna use the single spins, continuous single spins. And every time we transition from point A to point B, we're gonna have an element of that single spinning in so that it becomes comfortable, kind of becomes the hallmark of our style. And I think a lot of people, when they think about developing a style for their team, is really like, what are the ideas that that team is coming back to over and over? So again, this is something that can also help us take two unrelated pieces of the routine and still make them feel like they're part of the same performance. So, one more thing to consider for your routines, just using that motif idea to really make it connected. Last but not least, and this is one that we talk about maybe the most besides effect, is staging. And staging is making use of the performance area. Now, drill is unique. Drill is unique because we only, well, unlike any other athletic performing art, we don't have a one designated place where the judges are going to sit. In other words, it's not marching band where they're going to sit up in the press box, right? It's not dance where they're going to sit at a table in front of the stage that's in front of them. Judges, for them, I mean, with regional exceptions, judges for the most part are free roaming. And so this creates this very challenging but very kind of cool situation where we have to ask ourselves as we're going throughout the routine, where is the audience? In other words, where is the audience that we want to see this thing happening? In other words, this could be, where are the judges? We moved from here to here. Therefore, the judges probably aren't standing right here because they probably moved out of the way, and there's no room up here. We're at the front of the floor, so they must have moved back here. Okay, so now my audience is right here. Therefore, what I do here has to be staged to my audience who is most likely over in this section of the floor. We do that quite a bit, especially when we're designing routines with schools, or when we're coming in and helping, tune up or get the most out of those routines. A lot of the times, teams just haven't thought, where is my audience, right? Um, then the second question is, what are they going to see? And one of my favorite examples is, especially for armed drill, where um, we'll set we'll set the stage. For instance, if let's say we're reporting it, head judge is right in front of me, and I'll do something that's on the side of my body. Maybe I'll do a shoulder toss type skill with the rifle's on the side of my body. And because the rifle is on the side of my body, all the judge is seeing is the skinny side of the rifle, right? And what they are then exposed to is like, oh, is my angle a little, was my pitch a little bit off when I threw at the angle of the rifle in the air? Is my body distorting side to side a little bit as I reach to catch it? Whereas if we just turn that 90 degrees, the judge would see the entire arc of the rifle on the long flat side, right? It would hide anything that I was doing side to side because now they're seeing the skinny side of my body. And just in asking ourselves, what are they actually going to see? We might make totally different choices about where things are in the routine and kind of what they look like. So I think not only where is my audience, but then as a result, what are they going to see? And then thirdly, how am I going to make sure that they see it? How am I going to draw their eye to it? And one of the things that I think is one of the I know one of the things that is one of the biggest cardinal sins for us is like when we're watching a ripple line and the movements in the ripple line, like let's say the rifles are all dropping down in front of the bodies going this way, right? But the ripple line itself is going this way. So what we have is this idea where the rifles are falling in one direction, but the ripple is actually coming from the other direction. And now my eyes are going, I don't know which way to look, right? So the question is, how do I draw the eye? What is going to be logical? What is going to be the natural flow of how I'm taking this in while I'm watching? And does that align with what the effect I'm trying to go for? Does it align with that idea that I'm really trying to get to? And the other piece of the puzzle for drill that's really, really unique, I think, is not just how am I going to draw the eye in terms of like the motion of the movement, in a particular sequence, but how am I going to set the stage up? In other words, going back to the idea of like the cattle prod and judges is like, can I move my judges into a place that will create a stage for them naturally? Can I set the team up so that there is naturally a stage to see the most important effect that I'm trying to go for? That's what we're talking about with staging. Is just thinking about like, where's the audience? What are they going to see? How am I going to make sure that they actually see it? Right. Um, and I think for a team just getting started, even just thinking about that stuff would be huge. For the teams that are trying to go to that next level, one of the things that we have realized, and this is a thing for us as designers of routines, right? We can't always guarantee where the judges are going to be. Obviously, even if we use a great deal of logic, they might still step over the line. We've seen judges step up into the first row of the stands to get out of the way. You can never guarantee that. But you know what you can always guarantee is you can always guarantee where your camera is going to be positioned. And there may be things in your routine that you designed specifically to be seen from the angle that you're filming them because you know that video is going to go onto YouTube. You know that video is going to go to your principal. You know that video is going to go and be played at the assembly for the entire student body, whatever. Um, so there may be times when we're not just staging the routine for what gets seen in the moment at competition, but we may be staging the routine for what gets seen on YouTube 5 years from now, right? So always considering not only just the things that we talked about, but also who is my audience, right? So competition results are temporary. The algorithm lasts forever. There's a lot of things that we've staged for teams in the past where the whole point is when you go back and watch that video, later on, you see what the vision was of that particular moment. And so just thinking about all those factors combined are really going to help you out, I think, in developing a solid routine. So to wrap up, just 5 little concepts that you could use, things to consider. If you have any questions, as always, jared2cdrillteamtraining.com. Hit us up, let us know. If there's a comment section wherever you're watching, drop them in the comments. And hopefully this gives you some stuff to chew on as we kind of right now, in the moment, we're moving into the winter break time frame. Maybe it's a good time to sit back and see what's going on with your routine or see how you're going to finish it off and take some of these ideas into account. So we'll see you out there. Hopefully it was helpful and we'll talk to you all next time.